Hi, I'm Timothy, composer of the album Septemundos, and today I'm going to talk to you a little bit about the making of my first movement in that album, Graecus. So, Graecus, meaning the Greek world, takes place about 3,000 years ago. It's a story about a demigod fighting against the deity of the sky, Ouranos. So our demigod is the son of Aeolus, the king of the winds, and he's also the grandson of Poseidon. So while he has mostly the powers of the air and manipulating wind, he also has this small connection to the ocean, to the seas, through his mother, who is a daughter of Poseidon. So that's kind of why he's the special character and protagonist of the story, because he acts as a natural nemesis to Ouranos, who's trying to pull life forces, whether they're mortals or animals or creatures from our world, into himself to kind of reform. If you know the Greek myth of Ouranos, he basically was overthrown by his Titan children, who cut him up into a bajillion pieces and scattered him all over the face of the earth. And so now he's trying to, in this story, regain a consciousness, regain a physical form to take back his realm. And so it's up to the gods, who are very much alive and well in this universe, and our protagonist, the demigod, the son of Aeolus, to fight back and defeat him. And so we see in the course of the story that Ouranos overthrows most of the gods in an initial battle when he finally gains his physical form, and he's looking like he's going to take over the rest of the earth and regain the power that he's after. But then the remaining gods and our demigod protagonist, as well as a whole army of mortal men and other creatures that are on the side of preserving this planet, they all fight back in this one big final battle, and they do defeat Ouranos, as well as his army of monsters that he kind of raised up to fight with him. So to capture this kind of ancient Greek world, I was kind of at a crossroads. I thought about using some instruments that are kind of unique to the area of Greece. I mean, if you've watched any sort of Greek mythology movies, that is often a path that composers go down. They'll do some research. They'll find some instruments from Eastern Europe, especially some ancient ones. But as I was kind of planning out this whole album, I ultimately decided that I wanted to just have a really big statement piece for Western orchestra and Western instruments. I've never had the opportunity to do some long form music with just the Western orchestra. So I ultimately decided that I wanted to just stick with the instruments that I'm still working on that are from my culture, American/European culture, and try and see what I can do with just those. And so what you hear in this piece all over the place is a lot of flute. Just a regular flute. My friend Jaden played most of the solos throughout. There's piccolo as well. Other woodwind instruments play a role here and there, so there are soloists throughout from some of my friends on those as well. There's some harp, because I felt like a plucked instrument would add some nice color, some kind of intimacy to some of the quieter moments. But beyond that, I mean, it's still pretty standard orchestra, woodwinds, standard brass sections, some special percussion. I use some toms and some taikos that are a little bit heavier, not something you might necessarily find in a concert stage, but certainly in the realm of film music, cinematic music, you're not really going to hear anything anywhere in this piece that's super foreign if you listen to a lot of Western orchestra. I would say the one sonic element that I did add that is unique to this piece and hopefully helps contribute to the soundscape unique to this kind of ancient Greek sound I'm going for are some field recordings I did at a park nearby here in Oklahoma, where I just went out to the top of a hill and I put on my microphones right into the wind. Probably not a great idea, but I captured a lot of wind sound from there. I went down to the hill and I caught some like rustling leaves, some outside noises. Coincidentally, I ended up catching some people in the background that sounded like they were like laughing and having fun. So you hear that kind of sound design, that sonic soundscape, both at the beginning of the piece for Greece and as well as the end of the piece once the battle's over and things are resolved and calming down. I once again brought back that sonic design. So mostly standard orchestra, a little bit of that sound design on top to add a unique soundscape to the piece, but otherwise just pretty by the book as far as instrumentation is concerned. So let's talk a little bit about each kind of section of this piece. As we just go through this piece, you'll notice if you look on streaming services that there are 4 sections for Graecus, which are Greece, Gods, Ouranos, and Battle at the end. So Greece, that was literally the piece that got this whole album started. I mean, I've spent so many years planning this piece, planning the different movements in this album, writing down themes and things. But when I came up with the theme for Greece, that's what finally got me to start this project in the first place and get things rolling. So I wanted to write a theme that kind of channeled the idea, the calmness, the tenderness of wind, almost imagining that you're standing on a hill, just letting the wind kind of flow through your hair and your clothes, and thinking of your homeland, whatever that may be. In the case of our protagonist, he's thinking of the village he grew up in when this theme would play. And so it's kind of a two-part meaning to it. I mean, the first part of the theme is literally thinking of the village that he grew up in. And then the second part, the little B section, where it gets a little bit more dramatic, gets some interesting chords. That part is more specifically our protagonist, our hero, and the realization of his powers. So you hear that a couple of times in the piece, of course, most prominently in the beginning for Greece. And then it also comes back at the end during battle when our protagonist is having his big heroic moment. That theme plays in a couple of different instruments. First, you hear it with a whole bunch of reverb and wind sounds in the flute to really start off the whole piece. Then it comes in the cello. And the cello itself was really cool. I had the opportunity to record some solo instruments with some friends of mine in the string quartet Atlas. So while the string section is virtual instruments, Atlas provided the soloist on top to add some detail and emotion that you just can't get with sample libraries. And so you hear the cellos take up this theme, and then the violins pick it up, as well as the altos, and then eventually the whole choir comes in, And an interesting note that I should probably mention about the choir is they are speaking real things. I know a lot of cinematic choirs will just chant nonsense, but since I had the wonderful opportunity to record with Dr. Howard and the University of Oklahoma choirs, both the men's glee club and women's chorus, I was able to write actual lyrics. And so you'll see on the overlay the lyrics that I wrote. This is me doing some research and trying to figure out some Greek. So they are speaking Greek, and they're basically chanting about this idea of wind and how wind is free and unbound and how it just goes and goes and goes. And this idea kind of ties into our protagonist who channels the winds as part of his powers. So you get to hear a beautiful statement of the choir singing those words over the rest of the orchestra that's growing to this crescendo in that first segment of this movement. After that climax happens and we dive back out to harp, you get to the gods theme. And so this is actually, fun fact, one of my oldest themes that I've had on various different iterations of this music, going all the way back to 2013 when I first started writing tunes for these story ideas I had. This gods theme is among the oldest. And so you hear it first in the horn, played by Landon, wonderful horn and alumni of the University of Oklahoma. And it's supposed to kind of immediately shift the focus from this more calm and intimate, homey setting of a village to a more regal setting of something higher, And so it's channeling the gods, the Greek gods, their power, and ultimately pointing to their dwelling place, Mount Olympus. So you hear it in the horn first, and then we get a little bit of a takeover from some more brass and some more of the orchestra as I almost imagine like clouds parting and you just seeing this incredible paradise in front of you. So then the middle section of Gods is me just kind of riffing on that theme, throwing a little bit of the Greece theme as well. Me imagining you're almost walking through this paradise, seeing the muses over on this pavilion, playing their instruments and all their other art forms. And then maybe you keep walking and you see some gods just dancing over there. It's supposed to be a very awe-inspiring, awestruck scene as you're just kind of walking through this incredible landscape, up on this divine mountain. But, here, of course, as the piece progresses, it's still a little bit serious, and especially when it breaks into this big, full orchestral rendition of the Gods theme, it starts to take a turn for the worse. And that's me envisioning that the gods, while they have all this power and they have all this glory, being attacked almost out of nowhere by the deity of the sky, Ouranos. So even though we get this very triumphant start to the reiteration of the Gods theme, it quickly turns sour, and it gets overcome by this evil that topples it. That then becomes the transition to our villain in this story, Ouranos. Now this one, I guess I didn't mention earlier, there was a little bit more sound design that happens for the Ouranos theme, because I felt like a great effect for this villain, who is supposed to be the personification of the sky, was whispers and other vocal sound design that you can hear. There's some element of humanity, some kind of vocalisms going on, but it's very, very alien, very foreign, and very sinister sounding. So the first thing you hear after the whole orchestra collapses is me, a bunch of times, a bunch of iterations and reverb and all sorts of other processing, whispering the words Ouranos, Ouranos, and Vasias, which I think means conqueror or ruler, and then Archontas, which is Greek as well for, I think that's the one for conquer. I should probably go look this up and double check to confirm. So again, real words, but definitely buried under a lot of sound design. And then I bring in some of the other choir, and there's also some low woodwinds that start, and they start playing this really low oscillating chord structure, which is very much inspired by the Lord of the Rings and the orcs theme that you hear in those movies. But it's very slow and very drawn out. So, and you can hear me even like rasping for breath in the background as these low instruments are starting to bring some pitch back into it. So eventually you begin to hear the actual strings come back in, and they play the theme for Ouranos. So while up to this point it was mostly sound design and textural, you hear in the low strings this descending line that is the actual Ouranos theme. And it slowly builds and builds. For this segment of the piece, I almost imagine Ouranos is finally rising from wherever he's been, whatever consciousness he's had spread across the earth. He's finally coming together, and he's preparing to make his move on our world. And so horns and brass start to come in, the choir gets dramatic, everything kind of builds to this breaking point. And then we have one moment of pause, thinking that maybe we'll be okay, but no, we get into then the next segment, which is battle. And it is this big battle that begins with Ouranos attacking us, mortals, and whatever is left of the creatures and gods here on the mortal plane. It's just very chaotic. You hear the choir come back. This is once again the University of Oklahoma choirs just shouting at you, making these big building chords. There's some staccato Greek happening of them chanting, "I'm Ouranos, I ruler of all, conqueror of all, I'm going to take everything back." So it's all in this point in Ouranos' favor, because he had that element of surprise or just unknown power that our world is dealing with. But then, about halfway through the battle theme, you hear, after another restatement of the Ouranos theme, this string ostinato that ushers in basically the rebellion, the soldiers and the Greek armies and our demigod protagonist joining forces to fight back against this great evil. And for the climax of the piece, you hear a restatement of the Greek theme, the Greece theme, and our protagonist. And then, one of my favorite parts in this entire movement, I layer the gods theme on top of the protagonist and Greece theme in the very biggest climax of the piece, because at this point in the story, the gods and mortals and demigods have figured out how to work together, and they take on Ouranos all united on one front, and they win. They are able to defeat this deity and banish him back to wherever he came from, hopefully never to be seen again. So, of course, the piece ends very calmly. There's peace in the land. There is rest. And while there has been some loss, the evil has been defeated, and people can begin rebuilding their lives. So that's kind of a somewhat brief overview of the Greek world and how I kind of use these Western orchestra instruments to hopefully build this idea of this ancient Greek civilization taking on some demigods in this really fun fantasy adventure style of narrative. So I hope you found that intriguing. And if you would like to check out the music, of course, it's going to be linked in the description, as well as other walkthroughs that I'll have here on this channel. So definitely feel free to take a look at the other kind of behind the scenes and walkthroughs I have. And I hope that you enjoyed that, and you will enjoy more of me talking about these themes and these movements in the future. Thanks for watching.